welcome. Thank you guys for coming. I'm really excited about this program. I think it's a topic that is very timely for right now. And Nancy has been wonderful putting on these Empower Hours for us. Our mission, MMAC's mission, is we're state funded and locally funded to present drug and alcohol prevention programs, and we look at it in a very holistic way. So wellness is a big part of it because we want to make sure prevention starts by being healthy and building a healthy community so that we can keep young people, and all the way up I do programs for senior citizens who may, have issues with depression or anxiety or loneliness. And they also abuse alcohol and drugs and prescription medications because of how they're feeling. So this is a community-wide organization. You'll see us a lot in the schools, from elementary school through the high school. But we're here, and parent ed is a huge part of it. So thank you guys so much for coming out. If you want to learn more about MMAC and have ideas for programs that we can implement or issues that you're interested in, come talk to me. You can always reach me through Facebook, or my email address is mmacupdates@gmail.com. Thank you. I'll turn over to Nancy.
So nice to see so many new faces. We never know. We usually do these during the day, and then people say, no, we want the evening. But we never know this time of year how many people come. So I'm excited that we can hopefully have an intimate conversation, community conversation. So I'm Nancy Kislin. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, family and marriage therapist. I have a private practice in Chatham. I've been there for about 14 years. And I am most passionate about children, your children, my children, our children, and about educating parents, educating you on how to be the best version of yourself so you can help raise these amazing children. And it's so much harder today. My girls are in their 20s, mid-20s, and I can honestly say it's harder for you than it was for me. And it's harder because of this, which I forgot to hit play, record. There, I did it again. And it's harder because of all the stress and the anxiety and the pressure and the drugs and the alcohol, and we could go on and on. So what I thought tonight would be interesting if we talk about how do we create a better community for us and for our children. And part of that is just starting where you all are at. So let me ask you this. How many of you have kids in high school? No, high school. 1, 2. How many have middle school? A lot of middle school, almost everybody. Elementary. And nursery? Anyone nursery? No. Okay. Yeah, okay, we cover the gamut. So what are some of your fears is what I want to get out of tonight also, so that I can make sure that I give you what tips. I'm all about strategies and tips, and I want to give you tips to go home with. What are some things that you can do? So one of the things I thought about was, how do we raise empathetic children? How do we raise culturally sensitive children? How do we do that? We can't do that by ourselves. At least I don't know how to do that by myself. We have to do that by having conversations like this, to get to know each other better, to get to know what our sensitivities are, so we can then go and talk to our children about sensitivities. So tonight, I want us to talk about empathy, about cultural sensitivity, cultural humility, about what are some of our hot spots or our taboo things we're afraid of talking about. Because if we can talk about them a little bit, we're better off, we're more empowered to go home and talk to our kids about that. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? So when I say empathetic kids, anyone just want to shout out, what do you think of? What comes to mind when I say empathetic kids?
Caring.
Caring. What else?
Understanding.
Understanding. A child who understands someone else's pain, has compassion for somebody else, right? What else do you think?
Accepting of all.
Accepting of all. Beautiful, right? What about when I say culturally sensitive or culturally humble person?
Respectful.
Respectful. I like to add the word mutual respect to that, right? So it's a mutual thing going on here. What else?
Open.
Open. right? That they're not going through their life with, especially now, we can just stick the phone in and you can really go like this. How many of you see kids walking home from school with their head in their phone just walking? Isn't it amazing? How do they not trip and fall over themselves? Sometimes I just want to beep and be like, but, because really, it's like, to me, it's such a sad, sad state of affairs that, especially this time of year, missing all the trees, all the flowers, all the colors, all the sounds, right? If they're in there, how are they being opened? But the second part is, what are they hearing? What are they blasting in their ears that we as the parent need to know? Because if our goal is, specifically tonight, we're looking at the piece of the pie, piece of the child that's a good, kind, giving, empathetic person, we need to know what's 24/7 these days filling their minds. Does that, I see a lot of heads shaking. So do a lot of you have, I'm putting in the word trouble, that's not the right fair word. Do you have lots of discussions in your house about screen time and how much time people are on devices? Is that a universal? How many of you have boys? Do they play Fortnite? Everyone know what Fortnite is? How old are your boys?
Mine are 11 and 12.
Ask them if they play Fortnite.
They know what it is. They don't have.
Yay! So, are you comfortable telling everyone what Fortnite is?
I don't know what it is.
Oh,
I mean, I know
know.
that they know. I know that they've asked. I know that they've gone to friends' homes who have it.
So Fortnite is the most popular video game taking over this generation of kids right now. It's marketed as non-violent. It's marketed as non-violent because it doesn't have blood, but it has characters killing. That's the goal, how many people you can kill. But I was doing a program a couple of weeks ago in Chatham, and this kid raised his hand and he goes, "No, no, lady, don't worry. I don't play violent games. I play Fortnite." I said, "Not violent?" And he proceeds to go through a very detailed account of what he does on this game. And it's all about killing, and the goal is how many people you kill. But don't worry, lady, there's no blood involved. So I went home and Googled this game, and it actually is marketed that way. It's marketed as a non-violent game because there's no blood. Go through and start reading the reviews. I could do a whole program on that. So it also says it's free, but if you read through, it's free in the beginning, but if your kid wants to go up, I don't know what that's called because I don't go up the chat ladder, they need, what is it, Bitcoins, and it costs you money. Yeah. So that's Fortnite, but you need to know, right? So tonight, I want to throw it out to you, and we are so lucky to have a wonderful panel. We have Rose from Chatham, we have Jody from Short Hills, and we have Crystal from Millburn. Did I get it right? Mm-hmm. And they're going to help me just kind of talk about what we're seeing. Hello. Just come. We are just talking about, so one of the other things before I bring up the panel is, I'm curious about what your childhoods were like. Because I think when we are starting to really look at what kind of parents we want to be, we have to reflect back on our own childhood. What worked for me? What didn't work? What did I wish my mom did differently? What was really helpful? So one of the things when I look back on my childhood, there's lots of things I could tell you that was chaotic and crazy and wasn't so good for me. But there's a profound feeling of being safe, of being taken care of being loved and nurtured. And what about you guys? Tell me, anyone want to share? Did you, when you hear me say safe, was that, I saw a lot of heads nodding. Was that, so who made you feel safe? Parents? Right. Community? Did community help? A lot of nods. How did the community help you feel safe?
I feel like I knew more people in my community. I knew everyone. You knew everyone.
It was either mom's friends, dad's friends, siblings' friends. Somebody always knew who you were. Yep.
Yeah,
There's a lot of nods.
I think also like neighbors and stuff as well. People looked out for each other. And looked out for you. So
Right.
if your mom and dad weren't around, you still felt safe because you knew that your neighbors will also look out for you.
And your parents would say, go ahead, go to Mrs. So-and-so's house, go to Mrs. So-and-so's house. And they were known.
And kids may not have talked, we didn't necessarily talk to other kids on the bus, but we knew who was on our bus. And
Right.
now, no one looks up from their phone, so no one knows who's on their bus and who
It's
is
such an
who are their
interesting,
neighbors.
right, that's such an interesting piece. That, right, kids hate taking buses, right? No one's kid wants to take the bus to school. Hi, come on in. But even, I didn't like to take the bus either. The potheads were in the back of the bus, but you knew who the potheads were. and at least in my world, I knew who I was scared of, right? Like I knew where, okay, those kids aren't safe, so I know how to navigate it. But right now, I think what I hear Elise saying is that we don't even know, our kids don't even know how to navigate. There's a safe zone, there's an unsafe zone, right? It's just this blanket. Good. Anyone else want to share what was it like when you think back to your childhood?
I remember we used to play outside and build friendships like that, you know?
Right.
And today, I mean, in more areas, you don't see that often. It's these Fortnite video
Right.
games, you know, everybody wants to go back home to.
That seems to be a dirty word lately in my practice when I work with children and they're the parents and I'll say, go play outside. Oh God, man,
Right.
no. And I'm like, wait a minute, I just said go outside. Play basketball? No.
Right.
Like, and it makes me scared. I will say in my neighborhood, I have seen more kids playing outside than I have in a really long time. They're really little and my neighborhood is turning over, so it's exciting. Like, how long do we keep them outside playing? What other things do you remember from your childhood?
I think for me, there was a sense of trust in the sense that I could go to the store and come back, or go around the corner, or go a few blocks, and there was a sense of independence that was formed because we had, I couldn't go to the next town or whatever, but I could ride my bike and my mom would know, I would know my limitations, but I didn't feel scared because I had that boundary, but I also had that freedom. I don't see
So
that.
that's one of the take-home, thank you so much for saying that. That's one of the take-home pieces I want you all to think about is how do you foster a sense of independence in your child? Because that's key. We're talking about a well-rounded child, an empathetic, good kid, good meaning someone who cares and wants to give back. We need to trust them so that they can learn to trust themselves. Make sense? Right? So I found this definition, and I won't read to you much tonight, but I thought I just wanted to share this with you. What is cultural humility? What is cultural humility? This is when we recognize that we have bias and limitations to our knowledge regarding another's culture, whether they are seeking to relate to someone of a different race, age, or gender. Kids who better keep themselves in perspective and practical cultural humility are more likely to value the contributions of others to their lives. So I took this from a great site called Common Sense Education, if anyone ever checks that out, I really like it. And that just resonated with me so much because how many of us raise our children from a place of judgment, right? And are we even aware of how much judgment we bring to that carpool when we're driving them, or I hope we're all having dinner or breakfast or some meal with our children? So what do you think of when I say judgment? It's a hard word, and I'm pushing the limit a little bit here, I know. Judgment. Don't we all have our judgments? Gosh, I don't like the way that lawnmower guy cut my lawn. He didn't cut it the way I wanted. And I expressed that to my kids. That's a very benign one, right? That's totally benign. I don't like the way the grass is cut that way versus that way. But then, how do we take it into a more tricky area? I just killed the room. I just killed it. Right? So judgment. Oh my goodness. In my house, the rule was, unspoken rule was, we'd leave party X or family event X and we're House of Girls and we didn't all get in the car and we'd call it our debriefing session. And debrief. Nancy's not. Right? My husband, who grew up with boys, the first couple of times he's like, what is wrong with you all? He's like, you're so mean. We're like, we're not mean. He's like, Nancy, that's pure gossip. And I'm like, no, it's not gossip, but it's all so that you're the beholder, right? So we had a rule that it was okay only in my family system. It was only with my mother, my father never listened, and my sister and I. We would do it. But how many times do we do that? And what did that teach me as a child to grow up, right? Does that make sense? So did anyone else have the debriefing session in their house? Some people are nodding, right? Do you do it now with your daughter or with your kids? Yeah, we do it. It's human nature, right? But sometimes, how do we counterbalance that? I'm not saying I don't do that with my girls either, but how do we counterbalance that, add to it so we're not just teaching them to look for the negative. We're not just teaching them to think it's okay to gossip to anybody else. And these days, gossiping is oh so easy and dangerous, right? I mean, 2 seconds, it can backfire. So where else do we have judgments? Anyone want to be really brave? Not yet. Heather.
Well, when my kids tell me, like, well, you hear, well, so-and-so is allowed to do this, or so-and-so's mom lets them do this. And I have to say, well, sorry, you don't have so-and-so's mom, you've got me. And they take that as a judgment, because I'm not being blatant about it, but in a way I'm criticizing somebody else's parenting choices because we're not going to do it the way that somebody else. So that's fine. If that's their family and that's how they've decided to do it, fine. But that's not what's going to happen here in our family. So it could be, I mean, there are little things and there's big things. And they kind of have.
And as they get older, those little things turn into bigger things. You know, whether it's, we're talking about gun violence. I'm not going to let my children go to someone's house if that house, the dad and mom keep a gun in the house. You know, that's a whole, we don't have to go off on that tangent, but that's my judgment that as the mom, I don't want my child in that house, right? Good, bad, and different, someone might disagree, my kid, my rules. What about with alcohol? We hear this all, I don't know if you guys do, but I hear it all the time in this town. Oh, the kids know which houses they can go to where they can drink, where the parents are cool, or the parents don't turn a blind eye, right? So how we feel about that is our judgment too, right? So how do we use those? What other kind of judgments do we have? On grades? Don't we judge other kids? Oh my God, that kid's so smart. That kid always gets straight A's. You can't even compete with Johnny. Johnny always gets straight A's, right? We hear, don't you hear those things? Oh, he's the really smart one, Mom. But he has no friends, but he's really smart. Right? Yes. So how do we have some of those conversations? So what are some of the things you guys are hearing at home under this judgment kind of umbrella? Are you hearing your kids compare themselves to other children a lot? Or are you hearing them compare you to the other parents who, yes, lots of nods. How do they do it? How do they say it?
We just had a conversation like that today that usually comes down to video games or electronics. And my son was complaining that he felt he was less fortunate than other children. And, that is something that really strikes home with me because I feel, the attitude of gratitude is so important, and somehow I keep trying to instill this. But, sometimes they just don't see it, And he said, but I'm not those other children, Mom. I try to, I even showed videos of people starving when it comes to talking about food and, how lucky you are to have the food on your table, and to try and teach that there's so much more, like such a big world out there. But I still think that he's 12.
Well, attitude of gratitude, I love that. That's really good. That's really nice. So, and then I guess my answer to that would be keep fighting the fight, right? You got to keep fighting because you're not going to start it or finish it in one day. It's, I think of us as parents, we are the gardeners. We keep planting those seeds of information, and we hope that at some point it all comes together. Does that, you were going to say something too?
It's the same with my son. He's like, oh, that kid is able to play that game, but you never let me.
So let's see if we can brainstorm together, since this seems to be a common thing. What are some good comebacks? These kids are so smart. What are a couple comebacks for, oh my gosh, at his house he can play, da-da-da-da-da. So what are some good comebacks? Let's think. What do you usually, has anything worked? No.
Well, no, I just, you're not going to his house. If he's playing that at his house, you're not going to his house.
Do you ever call the mom? Do you guys ever call the mom and the dad to see? Oh, nobody likes that one. I've been doing this for 10 years and everyone's like, no, don't make me call the mom. Don't make me call the dad.
That's a bad idea. I did that once and I learned never to do it.
Oh no. How come?
No, because probably I would be the same way in her shoes. Is I don't like somebody complaining about my children.
It probably goes back to the whole
They
judgment.
did this and I don't like it either.
So like if someone called and just said, you know what, in our house I don't let my kids play Fortnite. I just wanted to know on their play date, can they play something else, just no video games? I don't think people would take, you know why? Tell me if I'm right. Nobody wants to have that fight with their kid. So they'd rather not have your kid over so they don't have to deal with it and just let their kid play. So sad, right? So is that sort of,
I mean, one solution I used to have was create another event. So instead of them going to each other's house, take them to a movie or...
right, that's great. Go bowling. Do we still have a roller rink around? I don't know if the kids.
Yeah.
But yes, always a good activity, especially for, it's a great idea also for kids who you're worrying that they're not fostering friendships as well as you would like, which is a common problem they're seeing because they're not developing a lot of the social skills they need, the kids, because they're so isolated in that box that, hey, maybe two moms go together and you go to Turtleback Zoo or you go to the movie, although the movie's great except they're not talking there, right? Something.
Well, you go to Strata too.
Okay, good. I didn't raise boys. I think boys are a little different. Girls, you can sort of throw them in and they'll start talking. So let's talk real quick about empathy. We talked about empathy? Empathy. Go home and see, anyone read stories? In my day, we used to have to go visit, my mother was big on community service, and we used to have to go like to the nursing home once a month. We'd have to go Meals on Wheels. We'd go to the soup kitchen. Believe me, I was no perfect angel, and I would complain, and I would complain, and I'd be scared. But somehow, my mom still planted those seeds. And like you said, showing the pictures, I would say, I challenge you to take it 3 steps farther. Instead of just the picture, find a shelter, find a soup kitchen and be like, you know what? There's kids 5 miles from here who don't have enough food, right? That way it's not a lecture and it's not a punishment, ever, ever. It's just you're creating an experience. You know what? I read this article and there's this shelter and I wanted to check it out. Why don't you guys come with me, right? Ask a friend to come with you and bring all your kids and make it fun. I wouldn't go out for McDonald's afterwards, though. I kind of, I'm kidding, but just erase the experience. So maybe what we could do, I was going to go through more points, but I think it might be more interesting if I bring you guys, bring the panel up, and then we can kind of go through these points together. Does that sound good? So we'll just slide these out here, and you guys just want to grab a seat. Are you comfy? Yeah. And so one of the first things is, oops, why don't you guys just introduce yourself and say how old your kids are? Is that good?
I'm starting, okay. I'm Crystal Adams. I have an almost 11-year-old and a 12-year-old.
Okay, I'm Jyoti Sharma, and I have a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old.
And I'm Rose Chansu from Chatham, and I have 2 girls. They are 11 and 13, so 6th and 8th grade in Chatham School District.
Great. So these lovely ladies trusted me enough to bring them up. So were any of you here a couple weeks ago when we did the program? You were here. So thank you for coming back. So maybe I'll just do a little recap and see if that helps. So Crystal and Jody were on the panel, as well as 2 other people. And the topic doesn't really matter. It was talking to your kids in a climate of fear. And somehow it got to a discussion about, I think I'm going to share the story. What do you think? Yeah. A mom in the back of the room raised her hand and shared that her son, who is in 7th grade, on the lacrosse, 5th grade.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, wait. Oh, yes, the 7th, you're right.
7th grade.
I was thinking about the
Okay.
other story.
7th grade. On the lacrosse game, the mom was watching and she heard other kids calling him the N-word. He's a black child. And the mom was back, shared this. And just the whole room went silent. And there's not, right? Am I telling you?
Mm-hmm.
And so the mom then shared that she was blown away by that parents interrupt. Oh my gosh, that's how the whole room was. Yep. The parents said anything. The coaches didn't say anything. So when the child came off the field, the mom said to her, "How come your friends are saying this to you? I don't understand." And he said, "Mom, don't worry. They gave me a pass." And she said, "What's a pass?" So apparently there's this thing they came up with, tell me if I'm saying this right, that if I give you a pass for the day or for the game, I can say anything to you, any insulting, disrespectful, you name it. But I gave him a pass, so he knows I'm still his friend, so I can say it. Exactly. That's how the whole room went. Hi. And it then facilitated an amazing conversation for probably over an hour about, welcome, come on in, about who are we as a community, what kind of community do we want to be raising our children in, and what are the boundaries? And that's the thing that prompted me to bring this program, the next step. And even if not that many people are here tonight, we have it being recorded so it can still be a tool for parents who aren't here. So in a community like ours that is becoming so lovely and diverse and changing, how do we as the parents take the lead? How do we help our children understand what is acceptable and unacceptable? What is right and what is wrong? Does that say? So I thought that it was important for I left out one thing. So since that night where I was totally just blown away, and that's not often that I'm speechless, but I was speechless for a little bit of time there. I started to do my own Nancy research, which means that every child who looks like they're middle school and up in the last week, 2 weeks, whether they're in our town or I just interviewed 2 people in Washington State yesterday, started to ask about this question. And anyone know what I found? I found, that there's this whole phenomenon happening in our culture where this is becoming acceptable.
The pass? Is that like a new trend
pass,
that kids are
so you guys are walking into a conversation and I have to fill you in it. So last program we did, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, a mom shared that her son was being called an awful word, the N-word, on the lacrosse field here in Millburn. And it facilitated a whole conversation about diversity and race and who are we and what are we, how are we the parents raising children so that this, and letting them know this is not acceptable and not in our town. So I was just saying, so I started to then do my own research in the last couple of weeks, and what I found is there seems to be this social acceptance that it's okay for people to say this word. And I interviewed this very smart 20-year-old yesterday who just told me, I don't agree with it. She's like, I don't agree with it, but this is what's happening. It's because of all the music we're listening to. It's from all the rap. So it made me think that there's so much music. Like we could all, if I went around the room, what was the favorite music you listened to when you were coming of age? What's the difference between the music you were listening to and the music our children are listening to? The difference is our children are listening to it in their ear. There's no adult supervision at all almost, right? So if they're listening to poisonous words, hateful words, there's almost no parental supervision. Does that make sense, right? So, yeah.
The other difference is the limits on the radio. We were only listening on the radio, which had rules about what words could be.
Right. And now it's this whole new frontier, and we're not doing so well as a society because there's no limits, and we're not teaching our children limits, and we're not teaching them what's not acceptable. The fact that this one child was, these children were so unacceptable on a field here in Millburn Short Hills makes me cry and scream at the same time, right? The fact that no adult even heard it or stood up for it makes me want to cry, right? So I want to stop talking, let you all guys talk. Does anyone want to? So I thought it was important for us to continue this conversation, which we did get, and then just to finish that is to then come up with suggestions that you can take home to, we have to be that catalyst of change. If we want this community to be a community we're continue to be proud of, how are we going to help foster that? Does that sound good? So one of you take it away.
I can start, yeah.
Okay.
So I think the first step would be to recognize the problem. When I talked to several moms after Nancy's last session, most of the moms were completely oblivious of this fact. And they said, not in this town. It can never happen. And it's not happening. In fact, they were, saying this cannot be true. Mm-hmm. And the way Nancy just described it, it's happening on social media. It's happening on Finsta, which you're probably not even, you're connected to your child, but you don't know they have a second profile that
Everyone
you're not
know
aware
what
of.
Finsta is?
So I don't know how many of you know about Finsta. Finstagram is, there's Instagram where they have their real profile, and then there's Finsta where they have their duplicate profile.
So Finsta stands for fake Instagram account. So I might have an Instagram, and I'm a girl in 16 in Millburn High, and I have like 2,000 followers or something crazy. But then I have my fake Instagram, which is just my intimate 200 friends or so. And that's where I'm more creative. I might be more revealing. I might tell the world who I have the hots for, all kinds of things like that. And so a lot of times that Finsta was actually created so that kids can hide it from parents, from adults.
Right, right. So I think where I took it from the last session was, first we need to recognize as a community that there is an issue, and let's address it, and draw the line. I was discussing with Nancy earlier, that's where we as a community draw a line and say, this is not acceptable. When your child comes home and says, guess what, Mom, they were talking about, some kids were saying this word. I think it's our job as parents to sit them down and say why this is not acceptable, this is not appropriate, and this should not be tolerated anywhere within our homes or in the school. So
but how do you know to ask that? That's what
But that's where conversations come in,
but
where
I would never think to say
that's why we're having this
Yeah.
program. That's why, yeah.
So most parents could not believe it. And I asked at least hundreds of parents, hundreds of moms, and they completely said, this is not possible, Jyoti, this is not happening.
Right, and then the kid came home and said, absolutely.
Yeah, and you talk to your kids and they'll say, absolutely, it's happening everywhere. And if you look at the social media, you will see, in fact, by doing this program, Nancy's really helping us as parents because people have been penalized for using this word openly on social media, and their privileges have been taken. Their college admissions have been revoked. So, by doing this program, I thank Nancy because she's actually educating parents, because we don't want our kids to be punished for doing such things which are completely not acceptable by anybody, not only in our town, but outside as well. So we need to educate our children and say, this is going to have repercussions. Your profile doesn't go anywhere. It stays there permanently. And you should not be using such words. So, this is something I think, thanks to you.
Crystal, you want to speak to the piece of educating, that we need to educate on all the different layers?
Yeah, sure. Where can I start? I think it's tough because, it's the acknowledgement is huge, and then when you don't know at all, when you have no idea, then you've got lots of things rolling in the air. And I've come that I always want to give the benefit of the doubt, but in this day and age, we have to ask all types of questions. I ask my kids, do they talk about sex in school? Do they use the N-word in school? Did they talk about race in school? Did someone say something about homosexuals in school? Did someone, because that's what they're growing into. Like this is what our world is, and we're in this beautiful bubble that's thinning out. And so we're not really able to protect them in this bubble that we used to be able to be in ourselves, because there's so much poking in, there's so much information, there's so much. But just regarding that, like one of the things I had to do for myself was go back to the definition of the word and the history. And there's a lot. It's loaded, it's loaded, it's loaded. And if you do that just for yourself, you can see why it shouldn't come out of your mouth. There's a counter, argument even within like the music community and such, that makes the fight a little harder. But because in general, if I can't say that in church or a synagogue, then I'm not going to say it in school. The schools, I believe the Board of Ed and teachers should be able to have, I don't even think you need tools to have courage to step in and say, not us, not here. Yeah. And I don't think we have, we're not in that place yet. We're not at that, we're not ready yet. I don't think our teachers feel equipped and supported enough. If we have parents that can't even acknowledge that some of these things are happening, I don't think there are teachers that know how to approach these topics. And
again, I think to your point, Crystal, this might be happening not under the teacher's supervision as well. It might be happening in areas where the adults are not listening to those conversations.
Yeah, I speak to my son every day, and it seems like it's there all the time, and he says, then is there no adult around? And he says, the kids are smart, Mom, what do you think? You think they're going to say that in front of an adult? Mm-hmm. So it should be a systemic thing. I don't know how they're going to catch it. And forget about kids. I was walking my dog down Hobart, and there were two young kids, must be in high school, and they were driving past me, and they were yelling at me, go back to your country. How do you expect that kids would not behave like that? These are young kids in middle school.
I think what's really important is modeling, and it sounds really trite, right? But I remember when my daughter was very young, and around the corner, there's a lovely couple. They've since moved, but the husband's Jewish, and the wife is Japanese, and there was a play date, and she was driving home the young girl who was playing with her son. And they were having conversations in the back. I think they were probably like 3rd grade at the time. My daughter was friends with her younger son. She was probably like 1 year old. And she was recounting the story to me, and she was saying, they were talking about their heritage, their ethnicity. And her son said, I'm half Japanese and half Jewish. And his friend says, we don't like Jewish people. And my friend said to me, she said, I don't like mustard on my sandwich. And so, we had this really, interesting conversation about it. And I said, it's probably because she's exposed to it. Someone probably close to her, who she looks up to, made that comment. And I think that we don't, not we collectively, but I think adults sometimes have conversations, and we're not sensitive about what we're saying, and we underestimate how much our children are absorbing. Mm-hmm. And they're absorbing everything because they're not stressed out and distracted by mortgages and bills and work stress or anything like this. Everything that you say, it's like the golden, I mean, especially when it comes from parents. And I think modeling is really important. But to your point about the N-word, my daughter, when she went to a lovely school in North Plainfield, and it was a wonderfully diverse school. And her first best friend is black. And she came home and she said knickers like underwear, K-N-I-C-K-E-Rs. And I was like, she was reading something and she's like, well, I think that word is a bad word. And I was like, I don't understand. I'm like, underwear? And so she told me, and then I remember, having the conversation with her friend's mom. I said, listen, they're just like 8 years old. the N-word came up, and I just want to talk about it. How do we want to team up as moms
Good for you.
and discuss it? Because, you know, my husband and I'm really thankful that we have the same values, but, you know, the things that's really important to us is that we've talked about sex early. We've talked about drugs early, because you know what? If we don't get there early, their friends will. And if they're going to hear about any of that stuff, it best come from me before. And it's having conversation. I've really altered my work schedule and the choices that I've made, because I get one shot at influencing my daughters. And I think, especially in this day and age, and you hear about, you know, the Me Too movement and all those kinds of things. I was like, for me, it's about making great decisions. I was like, don't worry about the academic, because quite honestly, I've seen a lot of highly achieving academic men and women out there and whatever. But it's about making great decisions and being confident about it. And they have been confronted with some really inappropriate behavior at school. And I said, be brave, because we will support you and your community will support you. But if you see someone who's not being, if that's not okay in our family, it's not okay outside of the family. And I think, how do we do that? And we spend a lot of our time in the city, and if I see something that's happening, I do something. That, my action, is the most powerful thing that we can do. So I can't affect the community, but if I could do that and do that with my child, then they're going to be courageous at school. And I think when we think about those kind of what to do, that's the most impactful.
And the fact that you just shared that with all of us, so thank you.
Yeah.
You had a question for her?
Wow, where do I begin?
Thank you.
It is amazing to me, the images. There's someone, I really think that everyone in this school district should take a look at Dr. Wing Su's work on microaggressions. He's a professor at Columbia University, a psychologist, and he came, my daughter attends Pingree, and there's private schools have a speaker series, and Pingree hosted him. And it was just amazing just to hear not just about Black experiences, but Asian experiences, Indian experiences, all these microaggressions that people deal with on a daily basis. And he really talked about the impact of those of that on your psyche and how you view the world. And I think there is a lot of unawareness about other and what does it mean. You know, every time I hear something that I view as ignorant, I don't necessarily blame the person. Do you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes they truly are ignorant, right? But I don't, in terms of why they would say the thing that they say to me, yeah. But I was raised in a family that sort of instilled in me that it's not my problem, that's their problem. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I don't fight every single battle. But that said, when I hear it, do you guys seen the ad that's being played for Kubrick and Kubrick, Take Back Our Town? I think to myself, what does that mean? Yeah. Have you seen it? No. Oh, come on, it's on TV all the time.
I always fast forward.
Wait, what is it advertising?
It's a hearing company, a local one, and the ad says, Take Back Our Town.
Oh, Cubic and Cubic?
Yeah, come back to, and then it has these different
Mr.
places
Cubic.
saying, you know, and I'm like, what does that have to do with hearing aids? But it's a reflection of
maybe he needs to use his own hearing aids.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, why? There was a deliberate choice in that. And what message is that?
So that's a local business?
Yes. Yes. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Whose town is it? And who are you taking it back from?
Yeah.
You know? But these are and we have adults, we live in an environment where now our kids are hanging about porn stars and this and that. You know, it's sort of, there's bad behavior from way up. And ultimately, we need to set the tone and to say, no, this is not acceptable. I mean, there's a grooming going on where the sense of, people are becoming emboldened because they see others behaving badly. And I think people who care about that need to speak up and say, no, that's really not acceptable.
So thank you for sharing that. So jumping off that, if you all have had this experience, something that wasn't okay, whether it be something Crystal shared her story last time or something, do you go to the school? Would you, hypothetically, do you feel comfortable? If something happened and your child shared that they heard someone being called a horrible name, would you go to the school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always go to the school.
Mm-hmm. So how do you know to do that? How do you know that that's safe?
I was just raised in a family where I was raised in New Haven, and my family was very culturally open, and there was no tolerance. I mean, it was, you know, the 80s and the Green Party, and my parents were just like very progressive parents, and it was like you see something, you say something, you're an upstander. That's just how I was raised. And I hate to go back to last year's blackface incident at Wyoming, but I am not surprised by the story you tell about the lacrosse field, because like Crystal and some of us that witnessed that day, I went home like, what am I supposed to, you know, it took me 24 hours to call the school and freak out, because you know, even I, thinking I need to stop this, didn't shut it down in that moment, and I wish I had. And
does everyone know this story?
No.
Okay. So you want me to recap it? I'll recap it.
I'm sorry to bring it up again.
No,
but you know, it was like.
Will you recap the story?
No, it was just, you know, there was a child in 5th grade dressed in a blackface costume as Rosa Parks, and
Martin Luther King.
Pardon?
As Martin Luther King.
I'm sorry, as Martin Luther King. Sorry, Sophia was Rosa Parks. And it was viewed by teachers and staff weeks before, and parents were streaming through the school looking at it that day. And all of us were looking at each other like, is this really happening? And it was happening. And even when we addressed it and we tried to get them to address it, and I talked to my children about it, and I know some people talk to their kids, but these adults, even seeing it with their own eyes, were also like, what should we do? So I don't think Millburn, I'm not surprised that there were parents standing around hearing that word. And you know, for me personally, when somebody says something to me, and it just happened this week, someone made a racial slur about who was buying my house, and I just looked and I said, what are you trying to say? You know, that's what I say back to somebody when they say something to me, like, what are you trying to say? Because it always puts it back on the other person, and then I just said, I think that's a little inappropriate. But that's only because I feel comfortable in my own skin now at this point, I've just had enough in some way of like some of this stuff going around. So that's kind of where I am. But with the school, I always feel, and maybe that's my entitlement, able to call and be like, what's going on here? And I did in that moment, because I knew something was wrong.
And again, culturally it might be different, like you feel like you can say.
Absolutely.
There are many other cultures who will not speak up, because that's just cultural wiring.
Yeah.
We don't say.
So that's one of the things I wanted us to talk about. So you shared so beautifully how you grew up and your parents taught you, like my mother taught me how to stand up.
Right.
So what I feel like we need to do, and one of my, like I'm holding the baton and I want to pass it to you all, is for you to feel confident, and what can we all impart to you that would help empower you, so if and when the time comes, you can feel, one, empowered to talk to your kids about it, and also feel comfortable to go to the school, or go to your kid can go to their boss, or whatever that place is. So the cultural piece is where, you know, maybe you guys could speak on in terms of, is there a cultural difference versus?
There is a huge difference. For instance, you know, my background is from India. I can give you that perspective. Growing up, we were not allowed to speak back to the teachers. It's authority. You just respond, but you don't speak back to your elders or your teachers. You don't complain as much, and anybody who speaks up is, you know, they have to take the repercussions. So most of us culturally growing up, we were not allowed to question anything. But you know, having moved here, many of us have learned to question things and ask questions, but culturally most of the people will not speak up. So although we might be trying to change that, our kids in our homes, you'll find most of them will be respectful to the parents, to the grandparents, and if they answer back to the grandparents, oh, it's a big no-no. They'll be in trouble if they answer back to the grandparents. So they know their boundaries, they know how much they can say and what they can't say. So they might be torn between the two worlds where the school is teaching them, you can speak up, and it's okay to speak up in a class, but at home, they are being taught that no, if an adult says something, then you can't speak back, and you can't answer back. So that's the difference in how you were raised versus a different culture might be coming from. It's respect for the elders.
And that's an excellent point, because I had to say that was a setback, and I didn't recognize that in my career. And so when you're not vocal or gregarious or assertive in a workplace, it's perceived as weakness. And it didn't occur to me until like midway in my career, you know, I was definitely getting recognized because I was performing and had, you know, the great work ethic because of my parents and the standards that they were really enforcing at home. But I realized too is that, you know, I was always picking up all these projects, but I wasn't really accelerating like some of my counterparts who I didn't feel was doing as much, but they were really vocal. They were vocal about their work and kind of just putting themselves out there. And my parents were always teaching me, just keep quiet, just do your work, and you'll be recognized. I'm like, that is not how it works. And now I'm raising, and I think it's like, you know, I meant to have two wonderful young women, you know, to bring them up, and it's teaching them because it's nuances. It's not about guns blazing, assertive in every aspect of your life, but it's being able to say, like, be confident in yourself. And thank you very much for bringing up about microaggressions. For those of you who are not familiar with that word, and it's just recently I've spent more time studying it and having conversations about it, but something as simple as because I'm not Caucasian, oftentimes folks will say to me, you know, you're really articulate. Or, where are you from? And I'm like, New York. And they're like, no, where are you really from? And it would just irritate me to no end. But I think...
And they think it's a compliment.
Yeah, they think, and I'm like, or one time we were in an ice cream shop, and it happened to be 3 Asian families, and we were in the mix, standing online, and you know, the guy behind the counter was like, oh, you're all together? And I'm not having a good day that day. I'm like, why? Why did you ask me? I'm like, do you not ask all those white folks if they're all together? And it's because we were all Asian. But this is, you know, it would embarrass my husband to death because, you know, he's Chinese. He's like, why do you got to be all up in people's faces like that? It's like, we need to educate people, but that's not... to be sensitive about what they're asking, what they're saying, and it's like, for me, it's very insulting. And it's like, you know, and I want to say something. I want to say something in front of my children because I have to model to them that they have to stand up for themselves. They don't have to do it in this very aggressive way, but I think they have to recognize that that's not okay.
Yeah, I've heard all of them, and even, you know, in some restaurants where they'll bring this hot chili pepper, as soon as it is, you know, we sit down, they'll be, you'll need this. So, you know, it's these preconceived notions that, oh, Indians will eat really hot food, so let's just put it on the table, whereas, you know, my kids may not eat it. It's those notions that are in our minds that are just propagated, or even your name, like they will not be able to pronounce your name. I don't blame for that, you know, some names can be complicated, but even at school sometimes saying that, oh, that name, it has a different meaning in English language, or making fun of it. You know, so having that sensitivity, building that in our kids that, yeah, somebody's name might be different, but you can't make fun of that. Or even the foods. For instance, if a child is taking food to the school which is different, which is their own culture, let's say, and people don't know about it, then it can come across like, oh, what are you eating? So these things, it's all culturally tied into the, you know, the micro.
I want to go back to something you said about torn between the two worlds. Sure. Thank you. I think that, does that resonate with people, that the fact that children must be so torn between the two worlds? They go home and they know they're supposed to be respectful to grandparents, but yet they're in the school where their experience is so much, right? Do you find that, and do you all find that that's a struggle that you deal with?
Yes, because like, we don't swear in front of our children, and our children are not allowed to swear in front of us. You know, I mean, every now and then, who doesn't say it, you know, a little something, it slips, but that's not, but there are other families, I know there are other families of color, my friends in California, her boys can swear and say all kinds of things, and there are differences in how families operate, there just are.
Well, I was interviewing this family after our program who lived in my neighborhood, and they happened to have a 7th grader and an 8th grader, and the mom used the example of just that. She doesn't allow her children to curse at all. No swear words, no cursing. And she said that it's a real problem because her son goes to someone's house and that house has a lot of cursing. So what does she do, right? And then it became a bigger issue. Well, Mom, everyone curses at school. There's no, according to the child's view, there's no punishment for cursing, which I'm sure is not true. Is that not true? Are the kids allowed to curse in middle school? No. Right? But of course,
Do it in front of the teacher.
No, yeah, they wouldn't do it.
exactly.
They're doing it in
So
places.
this is what I want to take home today, is this happens, whether you like it or not, it's happening. How do you get the child to go and talk to an adult about it without being ostracized? Because the fear is, if I am going to tell, then I am in trouble.
Right, it's a social suicide.
Yeah.
If you tell on somebody.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So
Kids
we
will
as
not-
adults can go tell the principal or talk
Okay,
to
I'm
an
so
adult.
glad you
How
brought
does the child stand
that
to
up.
it?
So let me stay focused on this, but I'm going to tell this. So I interviewed several people to be on the panel, and I had one woman who was going to do it. But then she sent me a text to say she decided that it might be, what did you say? Social suicide for her child if she put herself out here, which I totally respect, right? But the thing is, the story, one of the stories that I was told, and all these different people I talked to and I can't keep it straight, is that I hope many of you, if you give your child social media in the middle school years, which you're not supposed to, but if you do, that you have a system. Little footnote, give your child Instagram, make sure you sit down with them, make sure you go through their social media, da-da-da-da-da. Anyone who's heard me knows I have a whole spiel on this, but I really do believe it. So in her snooping, she discovered that a friend of her child's was engaging in pretty dangerous, serious behavior, self-harming behavior. So now the mom has this information. Child doesn't know the mom is snooping. What does the parent do? Sort of a little deviation from your story. Now, I know what I would advise as a mom and as a therapist, as a white Jewish woman. But I don't know, I throw it back to you guys, of what in your different hats do you say to that child? Anyone want to take that one?
I have a pretty, thankfully, I mean, I don't know if it's going to change because they're only 11 and 13. I don't know if it gets worse or better, but it's good right now. And I'm really thankful that we're having frank discussions early on that probably some other folks might have deemed inappropriate, but we felt like we needed to do that early to be that force. And they'll share certain things, and we'll have a conversation about if that should happen, something like that should happen.
So everyone hear that. So the tip is, not to interrupt you, the tip is you set the foundation, you set the stage ahead of time before there's a crisis.
Yeah.
So that way your child isn't left in that very terrifying, scary place. Oh my goodness, Johnny just said he wants to kill himself. I'm in 8th grade, I don't know how to handle that. We don't even know how to handle that. How can we expect a child to? And now that child, his own or her own anxiety is being built. One. So tip 1 is you set the stage for that.
Yes.
And you set the, step 2 is, we've had this several times, is that what I found in certain cultures, it's not comfortable. You guys correct me, but it's not okay where I might, if that happened, and I heard that about Nancy, God forbid, one of your kids, I would pick up the phone and say, Nancy, how can I help you? I might be overstepping my bounds, but something just came to my attention and da-da-da-da-da, right? I am taking a risk. I acknowledge I'm taking a risk that how did I get my information? Am I causing social suicide for my child? That's what I'm told, not my words. And you know what I care about? And I want you all to care about? Your child's not going to cause social suicide. They might think that, but that social suicide, what's that cycle now? It lasts maybe 24 hours in their world because it's, next kid has a new drama and they're on to the next. But you might actually be saving a life. And this person, this person who told me the story, I asked them if I could use it, so I don't want anyone to think I'm breaking confidentiality. So when she found that this child was self-harming via her child's social media, she then contacted a friend out of state. And that friend in a similar background said, don't worry about it. most of those kids don't ever kill themselves. So I screamed through the phone, exactly, and I said, wait, the advice came, apparently another professional like me, which is very alarming, that it's okay if kids are cutting, self-harming, but don't worry, those kids usually aren't the ones that kill themselves. So anyone who leaves here tonight, do know that self-harming behavior is never ever okay. It's a cry for help, and no parent should look at it from the selfish role of parent. If I knew, God forbid, your daughter was doing that and I didn't share that information, I am not taking care of your child or my child who's cutting, or anyone's child. So I think that's the piece, everyone getting it? The piece that we often are so worried about protecting our child, we're missing that this is all too much for our children's shoulders to carry alone. We've given them these ridiculous tools where they get so much information, but we're not giving them the skills. Nor should we have the expectation that a 12-year-old, 14-year-old, or 18-year-old would know how to stop someone from killing themselves. Right?
So Nancy, going back to how we were raised, I think if a neighbor saw me doing anything, my parents would know before I got home.
Right.
Right. Whereas the world we are living in, we are afraid to tell another parent that I saw your child and he or she was doing something wrong. You should be watching out. This is where our generation
So why
has
are we
changed.
so afraid? Why are we so afraid?
I think part of it is that our society has turned into like this nation of such entitlement. Everybody feels so entitled to do whatever they want to do, and everything is so taboo to say, or if you speak up on this, then, you know, it'll be called a certain term like a hate crime, which is very real. Hate crimes are very real, but the littlest things now, like you're entitled to say whatever you want, and if somebody comes up against you, they're gonna label it as something that it's really not. So I feel like there's this fear that you don't want to be the one to stand out because you're gonna get labeled as something that you didn't intend to be. So,
or even people who want to get involved. I think that's what I've heard from a lot of people. Then I'll be involved.
Right.
But how come our parents' generation, everyone was involved. The whole community was involved.
So one of my tips for you all to take home is, how do we foster our own? It takes courage, right? It takes courage to stand up for what is right and what is wrong. When I sat and heard Crystal's story and invited Crystal to come the next day to be on our panel, I don't know, did that take courage or not? I don't really even think of it anymore. I just know that the shoulders that I stand on from my parents and my grandparents, where I was taught, no, that's not okay, and I'm going to help create that conversation. And each of us has our amazing stories. I'm no different than any of you, right? We all come from amazing stories. What we have to do is find that courage within ourselves, get disconnected from all the things we're so preoccupied by, and help our children cultivate courage, because that's what they need. They need courage. They don't need to be babied because they have a big test tomorrow. Sorry. But they don't need to be babied. If one more person tells me my child can't have chores, you don't know how many AP tests they have. I don't know. I had AP tests, and I still had chores and a job. Somehow it goes to your entitlement, talking of entitlement. We're creating these entitled, not so nice kids at times, but it's because we're not taking the baton that was handed to us, and we're not having the courage to say, you know what, kid, that Fortnite is done, that device is done, and you need to start to be somebody other than just your grade or just your great musician, or, does that make sense? So one of the things is courage. And how do you build courage in children is you start with these kinds of conversations. I challenge you all to go home and share this evening with them. And don't do it in a 20-minute or 40-minute talk. No. Just throw in little tidbits when you're driving or at the breakfast table. I was so struck by this lovely person. She shared X at this program. What do you think about it? Or, wow, these ladies were talking about, oh yeah, we don't have any men in the room, it just occurred to me. See, they don't have the courage. Sorry. We scared them all away last time, didn't we? But you know, talk about, and definitely, I hope every single person in there, here, ask your children about what are you hearing in school, whether it be the vaping, which is epidemic, or it's the language, right? I hear there's not such nice language going on, or, right, we've talked about enough different things. So courage, I didn't mean to shut down you guys, but it just seemed like that was a good place to put in the tipping.
Can we just go back to the cultural sensitivity and microaggressions?
Yeah, I definitely, first of all, I strongly, you know, go online and look at for Dr. Wing Su at Columbia University and just take a look at some of his speaking, and I highly recommend that. The other thing I think that there's a lack of awareness about other. You know, like we all think of certain stereotypes, and you know, I'm not going to profess that my family's perfect. You look at different generations, and based on their experiences in this country or where they come from, there are some biases. There are. That's just, but that doesn't mean, you know, I like to try to understand why people do the things that they do, why they think that the way that they think, and part of it is lack of exposure, quite frankly. They've been so used to being around everybody like themselves all the time, and then in this environment, there's a sense of perfectionism, and you know, some of my friends who are white will say to me, people don't really want to share information because, you know, they don't want someone else to do better than their kids. There's a lot of that, a lot of competition.
They don't want to share what?
Information, like, you know.
What good college lady is out there,
yes.
that kind of.
I'm not saying people don't do it within their own small circles, but people are selective about who they share with. And when you have that sense of competition and that sense of wanting everything to look perfect, you don't open yourself up to
Okay, take it one step further. And what does that, everything you just said, do to the children that we are raising? Okay? That's where we're, right? That's where the damage is, right? So they're feeling the pressure that they have to be good enough. They're feeling lack of connected to community because there's little groups. I hear that all the time here. I've lived here almost 30 years, and we might sound and look a little different, but it's still these isolated little pockets, right? So, and I find, you tell me, but I see children more and more anxious, more and more lonely, more and more lonely, I call it the lonely generation. So how do we do that? So right? So how do...
I hear about how it's happening in classrooms too. And it is happening in school, and there are groups of kids, and there are teachers who only call on certain kids because they get the answers right. And there are teachers who say, oh, that's the smart corner of the room. And it's happening in school. It's not, you know, I think my daughter went into middle school completely blind to different, you know, she's like completely colorblind or culturally blind or whatever. She doesn't see differences in people. But then she gets to middle school and there are more differences and teachers call out differences and groups form in different ways. And
it's like a very interesting phenomenon because the same thing happened with my daughters. I mean, when they were describing their friends, again, they went to, before they went into the public school system, they were in a private school and it was really diverse. But even when they were describing their friends, it wasn't, oh, my best friend who's black. It's, oh, Sarai, she always wear the braids. Mm-hmm. So it was never, and then all of a sudden going into middle school, it was more race focused, the description. And it was just so fascinating to me. I'm like, when did that switch happen?
But it's also very academic focused. It's not just
right. Yeah.
Oh yes, like oh, they're the good kids because they're in honors, or you know, that person's in concept class or whatever. My kids don't really distinguish very much the academics. Yeah.
Some of my clients who are Asian will say, "Well, I'm in all the smart classes with the other Asians." and like even if this one girl, she's so articulate. She's like, even if I don't identify that way, they see me that way, so that's now my group.
Right, right.
Yes.
Or you'll see, you know, Indian boys like science, technology, engineering, math. So even I heard from some parents who said, a boy from Millburn and doing STEM, that's 3 strikes against you. You're not going to get into college easily. So it's both ways. It's, you know, and going back to your point, why people are hiding information, I just changed that completely. In our group of friends, I post all the information. You can't hide.
You're good.
I go out of my way and I'll share everything. Because you know what? Success of every child will make the school district great. It's not one child. People will know about Millburn only when every child is excelling. And guess what? 20 years from now, they're all your peers. You know them. You studied with them. And those are your connections. So help every child.
Yeah, but what I worry about in Millburn, in the schools, and what I've been seeing is that it's not the racial diversity and the cultural diversity, it's the lack of economic diversity here that has led to, and maybe it was you who mentioned it, because I hear it from my son too, where he says, you know, well, if we had, you know, I don't have X because we're poor. And I'm like, whoa.
Nobody's poor here.
Yeah.
But I have a suggestion for that.
Huge view of economic disparity.
Yeah. So there's a suggestion.
When somebody here says,
for that,
in his mind he thinks he's poor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, that's just
right.
I worry about that.
If you don't take them shopping every weekend,
right.
We're poor.
Right. Well, you would if we had more money, or and I'm like, yeah. That's just.
Or why don't you work more hard?
Wait, but there goes back to your point is, where's the why? See, I want to know the why. Why? Did he hear that on a YouTube video? Because
there's kids in his class are making fun of him because he doesn't have something.
But is that,
and that's a value choice.
But is that his why? Do you know that as fact, or you?
No, this is telling me. He's like, because he comes home and asks for something that somebody else has.
Right. Okay.
You know, why won't you buy this for me? Because I'm not going to.
Right.
You know,
but as Nancy said earlier, I think Nancy gave a good point. Just 5 miles from here.
Take them. We do. We drive through.
Take them 5 miles from here, and they'll see
this is a bubble. Drive through.
You have to go. And you have to actually take them there. For instance, my daughter did in 9th grade. She went to Liberty Science Center for a internship.
Right.
And there were kids from all around New Jersey. For the first time in her life, she took the train from here. She took the path and whatever. She took a couple of trains and walked and got there. Yeah. And then she met this group of 50 kids who were from all economic backgrounds. And they said, after this internship, I'm going to work in a restaurant and earn $10, and then I can buy my khaki pants for tomorrow. She came back and she was a different person.
Yeah.
She actually saw that this is the bubble we are living in.
But the responsibility comes back to us, and that's the parent role, right? I always say, I can't tell you how many times I've said to families, your child needs a job. I don't think any kid should ever go to college without having the experience of working. Yeah. And people look at me, you think of the answers, and I get them times 100, and this being videotaped, so now I'm in trouble. But it's just, it's not about the money, but it's about the pride that comes from, we all know that, right? Making the money. But if we get sidetracked and plugged into their anxiety, and they're plugged into our anxiety, right? Because of course we do care what they're going to college. We're human, we're their parents. We care what their grades are, but we have to find the balance or they're skewed. I call it, and we use this word a lot, is the bubble, right? This is the bubble. Millburn Short House is a beautiful bubble that your children are being raised in, but with that comes certain responsibilities, right? And that's how, that way it's not a punishment. Oh, I'm gonna take you to the shelter to work on Saturday because you were a brat. No, that's not, that doesn't work that way. But somebody else had their hand up. Yes.
You know, our generation thinks my son is not old enough sometimes to understand the concept of being empathetic and really being able to put himself in other people's shoes. But he came home the other day and he's telling me a little bit more. He's not a big talker, so it's always great when he starts to give a little bit. And so I was eagerly listening to what he was saying. He's describing the situation in the middle school classroom, and this is where I started to see that maybe he is developing a sense of empathy. He said, Mom, there's a teacher who thinks he's funny, and he picks on children. He picks on children to a point where they feel uncomfortable. And we can all tell that they're uncomfortable, but he keeps on doing it. And I didn't know at the time teacher that he's not particularly comfortable going up to and talking to. So, I mean, you're right, what I'm trying to say is that, you know, our kids, I think, are empathetic to a certain level, and sometimes they see things that we don't see, but they're not always in situations with older people that are going to set that example for them where you want it to be seen, especially in their schools.
So a great way to, one, is honor. That's always my number one. Honor. That took so much courage for you to tell me that. Or just however your words are, go in there and really acknowledge, wow, that's really, you know, better words, but nice that you saw that. I'm really struck by the fact that you saw how that little da-da-da was feeling bad. That's it. Don't overkill it. Just acknowledge, because that is building on that empathy skill. And then throw it back to him and say, so let's problem solve this. What should we, do you think there's anything we can do to help little Sammy in there? Don't you take the lead. Let him think. They're so smart in so many other ways than just a grade. Oh, well, I don't know, maybe da-da-da. And I'm guaranteed he can probably come up with ways that don't include you calling the teacher, right? He can go to the guidance counselor. There's a million places, right, he can go to in the school setting about that. He can just go over and say, Sammy, I just saw that, gosh, that was a hard class for you today. It might change that kid's life for the whole, right? So again, we don't have to have them solve the whole world's problems, but we just start where they're at. We acknowledge, we validate, and we throw it back to them. So what are you going to do, right? Does that come?
I think, you know, sometimes people frame the argument like, I think some people really do not understand the benefits of diversity. It's not like you're doing other ethnic groups a favor, you're doing your child a favor too. Right. Because we live in a world where this is not, increasingly it's a global scenario. I mean, my son who has autism is ordering stuff from China and from, you know, all his toys are coming from all over the place. If you don't embrace difference and start to learn about someone other than yourself, it will ultimately not be good for you going forward. Right. Do you know what I mean? And diverse ideas, I mean, the beauty of this country has been about diverse ideas, problem solving, ingenuity, you know, and, you know, bringing different strengths to the table. It's like I think there's this sense of this reticence to embrace it and to understand. You don't have to give yourself up to make room for other people. Do you know what I'm saying? No, you really don't. I just wanted to throw two films out. Like, I went to see RBG last night. Yesterday, I took my daughter because I thought I knew something about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think sometimes we take it for granted that our children really haven't seen a lot. And unless you expose them to it.
How old is she?
She's 13.
Good for you.
You know, have her go see something about another culture. Not necessarily something stereotypical, but I had a greater appreciation for how hard it was to achieve women's rights, and we're still not being paid equally, okay? But when you see the progression and Ruth Bader Ginsburg's role in that, I think it's wonderful for boys to see that. Yeah. For, you know, girls, everybody needs to see that and be reminded of where we've been. And one film that I like from an African-American perspective is The Great Debaters. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but I think it's a wonderful film to sort of depict it's about a black debate team from a school in the South who ultimately goes to debate Harvard. But the diversity of the group, you know, like, guess what? Even within these subsets, there's broad diversity within the black community. There's broad diversity in the Asian community, you know, but we're not all one.
Yeah. Well, you bring up, thank you. Everyone get those names? The Great Debaters and RBG. You just sparked something else. So while I was doing my research for this program, and I think, Jody, we talked about this a little bit, is what's also happening here in the community, you all chime in, is there's people who have been here maybe 10, 15 years, and then there's another wave of immigration happening. So I might look at other as other, not realizing that within that other, and this person who was sharing it with me was from China, and she's been here sort of like your journey, who's, right, 20, 30, 40 years, sorry, 30 years. And
no, it's just 15.
And the people who are just, literally just coming here, and how are they integrating, right? So there's the subset, but then there's also people who are out here just lumping them all together, and how that's happening in our community in many different ways, within the Indian community as well.
So there's recent immigrants who are just coming into the country. And of course, their experiences are different. They're just trying to get settled. Some of them might have even, what their status is in the country. So it's very different for a person who's been here 20 years, 25 years, and they've blended into the community. They've learned how to navigate through different issues. Whereas the younger moms who are coming in with young children, they may not know everything. Some of them don't even know the difference between, let's say, Board of Education and Township Committee. They won't know the difference. And I'm just giving you an example, but yeah, they're new. And I was like that. I was one of them. 20 years ago when I came, I didn't even know what is this local government and what is public school versus private school.
Tutor, can you imagine SAT?
SAT, ACT, yeah. I didn't go to high school here and I don't know. So they're learning the ropes as they come in and their kids are growing up. And whereas there's another group which has been here, like my in-laws generation, they've been here 40 years. And so they know everything.
And isn't that our American story? I mean, isn't that who we are in every generation? So when Jody and I were talking about exactly this, I was thinking in our little world, in this little group that we've started, how can we sort of be this catalyst for change? And how can we, since we're sitting here kind of being observers and talking about it and having the courage to really talk about it, how can we help facilitate change? And what would that even look like? So I thought we could just spend the last couple of minutes kind of talking about that, because we have all those generations right here, right? We have your in-laws generation, we have you, we have new. And we have that in many of the different groups, right? So how do we? So what are you guys thinking of? I'm looking for them like, uh-oh, what is she talking about now? No. Is that, are we even, the first thing I would challenge is, are we even aware of that? When our kids come home and they talk about some of their friends, are we even aware of sort of what someone else's struggle may be, right? Then there's the group you do. Talk about, you have the...
Right. I mean, I would add to that some moms might not even speak in English, some cultural groups. They're not even so conversant in language. Some other parents, culturally, we don't talk about certain subjects. We don't, as a culture, if you look at the Indian culture, certain subjects are taboo. My parents never talked to me about certain subjects, including sex, or whereas our kids...
They're watching right now.
That's good, that's fine. I'm very open with my kids. My kids can watch the video. But these subjects were taboo growing up, whereas our kids are growing up in a very open environment where they are open to discussion. So somebody who just comes into this country may find it pretty challenging to talk to their kids openly when their parents have never talked to them about these issues. So, that part, and again, the kids are torn between the home and the school. Should I date or should I not? If I go to prom with a guy, how do I do that? Because my parents don't approve of it, but in school, I'll be social outcast if I don't find a date.
And not only that, not only am I supposed to go to the prom, then I'm supposed to go to the after prom where everyone, boys and girls, sleep in the same house, right? And that's culturally somehow it's not acceptable in certain cultures, which the other kids might wonder, what, your parents won't allow you to have a boyfriend in high school? Why? And that could be hard for a child who's growing up here and his or her parents don't approve of certain things. So that might be a big conflict.
I grew up that way. I grew up speaking the dialect that we speak at home. I had ESL teachers. I was not allowed to go to the prom. I wasn't, not really supposed to talk to boys or hang out after school. Going out on the weekends, that was considered frivolous. It was work. My parents owned a restaurant out in Long Island, so I worked right after school. They made sure there was no room for any social shenanigans, because that was evil. That was evil, you know. And I'm one of 4 kids, and one of us was going to rebel. My sister rebelled in a big way. I mean, she went to the opposite side of the spectrum, and I was very much like, I'm going to do everything they tell me to do, be this good kid. And I think there's a balance. I mean, in some ways, I really appreciate, the structure. I really do. And in some ways, it was kind of like I never was a kid. And so I think, it's really informed me and how I want to raise my kids. But it's extremely difficult because you really, my parents don't speak English, and they've been in the United States forever. And I remember when my friends would come over, my parents would speak Chinese, and I'd have to translate. It's so freaking embarrassing, at the time. Of course, now I'm really proud because, I'm multilingual. But, it's very different for my kids because, like, one of my daughters, she's like, all I want to do is learn how to speak Mandarin so I can communicate with my grandparents. And it makes me feel really good that they're proud of their heritage. But I think one of the things when you were asking the question, Nancy, about what can we do, storytelling has been very huge education for me. My dad would tell me a lot of stories about how he grew up very poor. My dad came into this country with $7 in his pocket, and he's managed, I speak the language, he can't figure out a lot of things, but he managed to buy a home, build a business, put 4 kids through school, one of us through grad school, one through med school, and to me that's astounding, and it's like, it's really incredible. And so to me, intelligence is relative. It's your grit, right? And so the things I tell my kids is like, be curious, because I think sometimes people are quick to make a joke about something. It's really because they're insecure and they're uncomfortable, and their first line of defense is to make fun of it. And so I remember talking to a neighbor, and they're like, oh, you know about this. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Can you teach me? And I made sure I did this in front of my kids. And when you say it to someone, it's like, no, I don't know. Can you teach me? It's a very different conversation.
Well, you go right to the word. It's humble.
Yes, you're like, can you teach me? They're like, oh yeah, and then they approach it differently. It's not like, oh, you're not smart. Yeah, they're more like, oh, she's open to it. And so I would say, how do we teach our kids to be more curious in every facet? And because that's going to make them very successful, in every part of their lives, even professionally, because it's really changes the whole dynamic of a conversation when you say, oh, I don't know that. Can you teach me?
Right. I think another thing I've noticed is that might be helpful is that you make friends not only from people in your own culture, you make friendships with wide variety of people. That's what the kids notice, like having close friends. I've had close friends from work or within my own circle which are not from my culture. And I think that's what kids see, that I can have a close friendship with somebody, not irrespective of where they came from, what their culture is, just because I connect with somebody. And I feel like I have similar thoughts and I have similar ideas. So that the kids will see that. And that's where they'll be more open to,
Yeah, I found that to be very helpful too, having friends, because my daughter, when she was in 5th grade, she was the only black girl in her grade, and it was problematic for many reasons, including that incident, but especially that incident. But she was also shy, and so she wasn't extroverted. She wouldn't put herself out there. It really wasn't until 5th grade when she started to be more, and she acquired friends of Asian descent and Indian descent. And so even though she was the only one, what we call the token, she wasn't the only one. And so there were experiences that she could share, whether subtle or overt, with these friendships. And it carried on even into middle school now. And so there's like a rainbow of friends that we have going on, and I think that's very important, and it's actually vital, and even down to what you said about it helping everybody in diversity. But the thing that I feel like is a block is the fact that, like, coming back to even the very beginning of our community, what is our community? What is our setup? Because what I've come to find is that, like, and I think I've even gained this myself when I'm walking down the block, is that we have almost like this gated mentality, this white fence around our own selves, our own lives, our 4 and no more, or however many children you have. And so it makes it harder to step out and make friends with other cultures or friends with Caucasian, whatever the case may be. And so my question or challenge in brainstorming is, how do we break that wall down so that we can feel like we're open enough to be friends with, we're always going to have there'll be cultural differences, and there'll be cultural things to think about as far as even how we approach each other, and biases or ignorances or things that we have to learn. But how do we change the environment so that the soil is something that we can grow from?
Well said. So with that is, maybe that's something we created under MMAC, our Drug, Alcohol, and Mental Health Task Force, to kind of just talk about what's going on in this community. And out of that came our first program was our multicultural, turned into a series now. So maybe that's something we keep looking at, and maybe there could be more programs like this on a larger scale in the community, which would be great. The one thing that I feel like still hanging out here that we didn't really land anywhere is the whole ugly discussion about this phenomenon in the schools where kids are using the ugly word, right? So is there anything, we're all such bright, powerful women in this room, that we can kind of bring to you all this to say, right, that we all can say to the community, okay, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, you know? Like there's the campaign we do, parents who host lose the most, right? So that means if you serve alcohol. Yes?
I was gonna say, like, I'm still blown away by that whole lacrosse team thing. And I just feel like, you know, everybody, I'm assuming everybody's here because they want to figure out ways to help the community in these issues. And I just feel like with great power comes great responsibility, and that includes knowledge. Now that there's an awareness about it, I feel like there's a responsibility to do something to get out there and speak up more for these types of situations, because that's unbelievable to me. Not one parent said anything about it. Like, what does that say about, you know, not to pass judgment on anybody, but what does that say about like a whole community of people who had nothing to say about something that I know deep down inside they knew was wrong? Not one person, and it doesn't make any sense to me. So I just feel like with great knowledge also comes great responsibility. And a young lady said something about her privilege at one point, and I do think it is important, especially, you know, as someone who is white, to use your privilege and help others when you know it's wrong. I do feel like that's very important, and I congratulate you for being aware of that privilege and utilizing it for something positive. Because
I just call it being an ally, but yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
What do you that's a good word for
Trying
it.
to be an ally.
An ally.
Absolutely.
See it as a privilege.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think it's important that we work together because we can't do it alone. No one
But I
can
would
do
say
this
the
alone.
majority of the people might still be in denial. They cannot believe.
Oh, absolutely. But like, that's what I'm talking about, the knowledge. Now that you know,
Right.
you know, there's a responsibility to kind of get out there and.
But I wanted to add, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no.
I don't know if that much in denial, maybe they probably using it at home themselves. Like, I feel like, I'm sorry, but if your kids say that, you can't blame it all on rap music, because it's just, the kids can listen to something, but if they know that it's wrong, they will know it from the parents. You lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of parents are not understanding their role, and they're not taking responsibility for what happened with their kids.
I think it's something that should be taken very seriously, and what we talked, where do we draw the line?
Well,
right?
Well, I think where we draw the line is right here. Anything, at least anything that is hurtful to someone else is the line, right? I don't know how else,
But it wasn't hurtful, like, I mean, did the kid, did he believe that he had a pass? did it hurt him? Did he not say anything?
I'm actually more astounded that there's actually this
This
practice that
Right.
this person was
Yeah.
giving somebody permission
I
to
think
insult
that
them.
child,
No,
I find that
wait, I
insulting.
wish she was here, because my sense, you tell me, whoever else was here that night, was that the kid was more concerned that his mom would make a big deal about it. Mom, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, Mom, it's okay. Like, they gave me a pass, it's okay, and she would,
I think it's that like the white kids are getting passes to say things to a certain amount.
right, so Mom, like, I wanna fit in, I wanna have
it's the
friends,
thing.
so.
Yeah.
But it
or, I
seems
mean,
like
it's-
any kid is saying it to any kid. It's not
Yes.
like targeted
Yeah.
towards
Right.
a specific kid.
Okay, so wait,
It wasn't a white
no, 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 no.
Yes, they do say to like.
Wait,
Yeah,
this
they-
is really important. There's several tiers to this, and I could be wrong, but this is what I found. There is the horrible example, the lacrosse game, and that was specifically white to not white, to black. Then there's example where I've asked kids of color as well, where they'll say they change the ending,
The ER to the A.
A, which is apparently from the rap music. That's where at least that's what they told me. But it's still, many of them will say it's okay if they say to each other, but it's never okay for me to say to them. And then there's a third thing where there's four. There's white kids who are just using it to
They're saying
whoever.
it's other white kids.
Right. So, but that is still
And it doesn't make it okay.
It doesn't
Yeah.
make it
Doesn't make
okay.
It's not okay
It's
on
an
any
offensive
level.
word, period.
No level.
So what we are seeing, why I share that, not to make it okay, is to me it's this watering down. See, if we water down the
Right.
issue enough,
It's not.
it's
something.
people saying it's not such a big deal. And I'm saying, start at one, and you don't need to go past one, right? It's not okay. It's a non-tolerance zone.
Was your
You can
discussion with the
So,
coaches? I'm sorry, I just wondered, did someone talk to the coaches?
Well, apparently it's
Right.
it's not Millburn Township, and it's not a school. It's just a separate team, right? It's not through the school, and it's not through the rec department. And so I don't know. It's like private parents join together and bring in this.
So I think we're sort of battling two things, right? Because to your point, people are saying it among themselves, and some families actually think it's okay. Some adults, I know some people of color who they will call their little kid a little N-word. So I think that there's a double-edged sword here. But I personally think, in order for us to change it, we need to sort of elevate this and make it unacceptable sort of town-wide. So the people all here in the room, our kids are probably know that they can't say it because we're here. There's a lot of people that are not here. There are a lot of people that are not hearing this conversation. There's a lot of things going on in the schools that if things are elevated, teachers just sort of like, yeah, okay, and sort of not really address it. So I feel that we almost need to make it, elevate it and try and make it truly unacceptable, a social taboo, so that, you know, these kids are sort of living and breathing it. Because we can do it all in our own houses, but how many of us are here? 25,
So
30
wait,
people?
so how do we make it a social taboo? I like that. That's a great.
Well, here's the thing also, is that, like, as you're saying, like, on Facebook, if they're posting on Facebook, like, my whole argument from jumpstart of getting into the whole idea of diversity and cultural sensitivity is, we already know that we're in a very good school system. We know that our kids are learning and that they're in the top 10, top whatever. I know that my daughter is doing very well academically. I know that my son is doing well academically. I would hate for, and this goes for any of my friends, anybody, right, for our children to be in a school system that is cutting edge on STEM and brilliance and is working at NASA, working at Wall Street, working at, you know, the White House and doing a better job. But to lose a scholarship, lose a job, lose a relationship, get demoted, lose a friend because of social stupidity. Yeah. We don't want our kids to be socially competent. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to, then all of this was in vain. 18 years was a waste of the stress, the park exams, the, you know, APs, moms coming to the Board of Ed and ready to cuss out the board. You know, like, it's all a waste.
So can we create a committee or a subcommittee under the task force that specifically works on, I don't know what to call it, tolerance? Do we call it race related? I don't know. Someone help me out. But we call it a specific. And in that, we can work with the school just to come up with multi-tiered ways of educating parents, kids, age appropriate, grade appropriate. Does that sound? I mean, maybe that's how, and I love your word of social taboo. This is social taboo. And so that in a year from now, if a kid has the nerve to say it on the field, they know, and that parent knows there's repercussions because we're in a no tolerance town and that's not okay here.
But there's a difference between social taboo and what we're talking about, because you're still hearing it on the radio and maybe on TV. I'm not saying that it's not taboo, but...
So maybe no tolerance.
Zero tolerance.
Right.
It's, yeah, because there's this whole thing, the thing that's just, I can't get over is the past. And that, like, to me, that's just...
Well, there's just so many layers of...
Right. Yeah, it's just...
But again, going back to the lyrics that you were talking, in the, all the lyrics have these words. I think as parents, it's our job to listen to that with the kids and then say, okay, this is not appropriate.
It's not just the music. You're watching it on television.
Yeah.
It's now in all of your TV shows. It's not, it's become part of the social culture.
Yeah.
And that's what we're fighting against. It's the ER or the A. It doesn't matter. That's the diluting.
It's really like a social maturity and a social intelligence that we need more than, because it's out there.
Well, it's a privilege
something else.
Nancy, as you said to me today, it's not just about this word, it's about the name calling that has now been allowed to be part of our culture from very high levels on down.
Right.
Well, I think it's a character issue, like what you're saying. I mean, personally, I would hate to see my kid lose their scholarship or whatever, but essentially at the end of the day, I'm like, so who are you as a person?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I don't want you to use that word because I don't care about your
That's
scholarship or
right.
what job you lost. I don't ever want to hear you say that word. And just kind of collectively, everything, all the beautiful things people have said, I think, and what you said so eloquently, is you got to catch your kids early. Like second grade, I talk to my kids second grade, slavery, Dr. King, civil rights. Like, because if you don't, there is a vacuum, and they don't know anything. They don't know why they're different from this person or that person, and they need to celebrate it in early on, because I shouldn't assume that they know anything about who's come here as an immigrant, who didn't get to come here as an immigrant, but came through in a horrifying way. You know what I'm saying? So there's like ways to celebrate all of that, but I do think if you catch your kids early, like first grade, second grade, hey, guess what? There's certain words that we don't ever, so that when they hear it in the music, it doesn't say to them, oh, I can use this now. It says, oh boy, I can't believe someone's using that.
Who would ever think to tell their kid they can't say that word? Like, it would never.
Really?
That word, like, I haven't heard that word, like, in so long. I would never think.
You haven't? You said
Well,
you
no,
had?
I mean now in music and stuff, but like, it would never occur to me that kids would use that word and I need to tell my daughter. That wouldn't have.
Absolutely.
But if you talk to them now, if you go home and talk,
yeah.
they will
I
say,
guess I told her.
yes.
But that's what happened last week. Last week when we
were
said
shocked.
it,
That's the
I'm
first
looking
time we
around
heard.
and nobody knows, and that's the problem.
Right.
It's like
My
we
learning
have
curve
to
in
bring
3 weeks
awareness.
has just gone, right.
And
And I feel like,
to tell her that.
I feel so sorry that I didn't know sooner. I mean, that's like, I feel, I'm not sure guilt, but I do feel the heavy responsibility. Well, now I do know. You said it so well. I do know. And so now we all are witnesses to this because...
And I wonder what else. So we're talking about the N word, but I'm
What
sure
else?
there's other
Yeah, there's
words that
plenty
they're
of other
using.
words.
Oh, I
sure
can
all
tell
different.
you. I can tell you because I have a young son who's, I would say, gender non-conforming, and some kids went to my oldest and told him, "Oh, your brother is a freak. Your brother is a." Okay, and so my son, my oldest, got very upset, and this is why I had to call the school, because I'm like, this is unacceptable. We're in 2018. Gay people have the rights of like anybody else. So there's many words.
There are many words.
And again, like nobody should tell you, go back to your country. I'm sorry, you have an accent, you're here, deal with it.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
this nation was based on immigration.
Well, I just find that
Yes.
it's amazing that we're having this conversation, because my grandfather had an accent, right? So we're all the same, but it seems like it goes to whoever was saying about the entitlement. Somehow we seem to have very short memory, right? And all of a sudden we're living in this little entitlement we're raising.
Yeah.
You keep talking, I'm popping.
So I guess, again, with that is like, over the course of this school year, and coming from, again, what happened last year, is this overwhelming burden to, as much as possible, share information and get involved with the school and see how can we educate in the classrooms, how can parents partner with the school, how can we, and it's not about bashing, it's not about guilting. I don't need anybody to apologize to me about slavery, you know, like it's not about that. It's about being that, again, all the way up in our country where there are words being spewed, even down to veterans and being taught. We know what's being, we have to come from the ground up, you know, and the schools have to, because I always say, like, there's an assumption that the schools are talking to the kids about this, and there's an assumption that the parents are talking to the kids about this. So there's a huge gap. And if we can come from both ends, both the parents and our community, and I want to say actually our community, the parents and our community, and the school, the Board of Ed, the district, the teachers, the principals, the admin, the teachers' aides, if we can somehow partner together and have the information coming in both ways, then we'll close that gap. I think that's really, really important that we understand that it really, truly takes a village to raise, you know, empathetic, culturally, human. That entire thing, you know.
I also think that the teachers, there needs to be diversity with the teachers, right? Yes. Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm like you, I understand the ignorance, right? But if there's diversity in the teachers, then there's more awakening. I don't think anything, what happened to Sophia would never have happened if there was more diverse teachers that were like, hold on, that ain't right.
But at the same time, even the teachers who know better, if they felt supported enough to speak up, because there were teachers who saw, all of the teachers saw, everybody saw. So there was an opportunity for even some teachers to speak up. It doesn't even matter who, and I know who the teacher was that allowed it. I know that some people are afraid of her. I know, like, there's so much with that. But the idea is that, like, we have to have a support. We have to learn from it and know that things are actually happening so that we don't have that happening again. Or if it does happen again, that there's already a standard saying we're not okay with this, we're not going to allow this, we're not going to tolerate this. And that's my problem, my personal problem is, like, where's the standard so that immediately something is saying, like, no, we're not going to wait, we're not going to hold off, we're not going to right then and there, because if, again, going back to out in the big boy, big girl world, if something like that happens, you lose your scholarship, you lose this, it's automatic, it's just like that, you know? Because there's a standard, there's a standard.
So what we're saying...
I have a quick question. I mean, this is a really interesting conversation and dialogue, and I think there's a lot of respect in the space. There's a lot of conversation about, you know, the teachers and us as parents, but is there an opportunity for someone to gather and facilitate this type of conversation for the students? I think it could be listen, at the end of the day, they're at their phase of life where they just see this as authority and this is being put upon them. But if we're bringing them into the room, this is their problem.
Well, someone on the...
They're going to take a different stance on it if they are empowered.
Someone on our task force brought that up, is how do we start to get some of the students. But we felt, at least Crystal and I felt, like we needed to have this one more time before we brought in the students, just so we sort of, I don't know, I felt like I needed to know sort of where we were going with it. And now, sorry,
I was going to ask, would you consider doing these like at every elementary school, like in the evening? Because for a more intimate, like, neighborhood type setting,
That's
maybe
a
more
great
parents
idea.
would come if you just had it at your neighborhood elementary school one night and, you know, really promoted it for like a month or something. You know, because maybe more people would feel more comfortable just going to their elementary school auditorium and sitting in the dark and hearing people talk. Yes, you know? It's exposure to talking. It's very empowering.
We'll just put you guys on tour. It's a great idea, but what I love about it is this.
Yeah,
I
right.
think this is where the magic happens, is us talking about and seeing that, you know, I so much learn from each and every one of you tonight, and that helps me then help everyone I help, right? So how do we, okay, I'm gonna cough again so we can start. That means the night's almost over.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry. No, I'm coughing. Go, please.
So I do want to thank
I don't know if you'll
everyone
know this is Dr. Burton.
for the opportunity, and I know that I talked with Nancy about how we do need to continue with these dialogues, continue with the work of the school. And we have talked about training, and we are in the process of bringing training for teachers and making this a much more of a focus for, you know, we are a community. I absolutely love what you're saying. You know, we have failed if we have said to our kids, we give you the best education, we give you all the textbooks, the technology, but also, are we equipping you with the world that you will be? This is the world that we live in, ladies and gentlemen. This is the world that you will interface with. These are the, you know what I mean, all of the people with whom that you will be working. And so the idea of the bubble is, you know what I mean, you know, the world in which we have to all be a part of. And understanding that and helping them to navigate it when they're this old, so that they're not making those mistakes when they're this old and they're in the work world, because the work world will expect this of you. And so one of the things that we have heard a lot about, and that is information sharing. And sometimes people don't want to get involved. People feel as though, if I could just tell you this information, because I do know, so that you know, I'm a mom, and I feel like I have 5,000 kids. So when parents, and I have to tell you, when parents say, I mean, I get all of these things, these blogs and information like, oh, the school doesn't care. Okay, hold on. This woman cares. I will treat, and I do, I treat all the kids like what I want from my two girls, when you're saying girls, you know, my girls, how I raise them to be, and the things that, and they even say to me, you know, that's how I treat every kid in this district, like they're my kids. And I like that idea. I would say to my kids, we don't say this. We don't do that. No, we don't act like that. Not in our house. This is the way. That same idea. So if there are things, and I can tell you parents have come, they know, go tell her. She'll do something about it. When I hear these things, I am duty bound. I truly feel as though you tell me I have got to do. That's what my role is as an administrator, but you know, first and foremost as a mom, as a parent. And so one of the things that we have looked on very carefully about, actually I have to give credit to Nancy, Sandy Hook and the Sandy Hook Promise is an organization after the tragedy in Sandy Hook, a group of parents who said, we need to do something about this. And so they provide 24/7 access to a hotline that gives parents, communities, the opportunity to have a say something. It's a website, it's an app, it's a 24-hour hotline number that you can call anonymously to share with the school information. Any kind of information. Children self-harm, information about someone could be harming the school, anything. This information, there's a teacher in the middle school that's doing things. I can tell you as an administrator, as a teacher, spent a lot of years in the middle school. I mean, and kids do. They're kids, they do, particularly when they're trying to figure things out. There is no place for sarcasm in school. No place for sarcasm. You're an adult, you know it's hard to have people interface with as an adult. Sarcasm, kids don't get sarcasm. So the element of sarcasm, there is absolutely no place for it in school. And so this website, and we're in the process of getting all of the information, and the best part of it is
by September.
it's free. And so that is connecting with our administrators, training them, training the staff to help kids do it, training the students, and training the parents. If there are things out in our community, to your point, words, I mean, all kinds of ethnic slurs, and we don't do that in Millburn. That's the culture of kids we need to raise. That every one of you're learning from every person you meet will teach you something. And so that's what you can learn from, and you to them. That's what we need to be building in our kids, because truly then we will have given every tool we can give them. If you have the education, you have the transcript, but you can't interface with, and someone doesn't want to work with you because of you're just off-putting, we have failed you. We truly have. So that is an integral part of what we need to be doing to truly say, as I shake every high school senior's hand, I'm sending you off. You know what I mean? Make us proud. So I just share that because this work is really, really important work. We can't do all that we do to bring the best and the brightest, and we fail them on this kind of on this part of, because the world of work, and you know what I mean, we are a flat world, and we talk about that we will have every level, and I so embrace it. I love talking with people and saying, where are you from, and how you enrich the culture that we call ourselves Millburn. And then we have a job to help and to teach others. That's our job and that's our role. And it is to protect all of our kids, because they're still kids. So I just share with you because it really is, and that's why I stay tonight. I mean, I know that Nancy was going to, I spent a lot of late nights, but these are the kinds of things also that you spend time doing and connecting with people on. So.
And it is an important focus right now for the school district. As you know, Crystal, we've been meeting, and we have a specialist coming in next year to do training with teachers, especially on diversity topics. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.